Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 28 days through the Gospel of Matthew. We are on day 2 today, chapter 2 today, and we are going to get introduced today to the wise men. I know that we really don't ever hardly hear about the wise men unless it's around Christmas time, but I want you to know that these men were very educated scholars, and many believe that they were actually astrologers, meaning that they studied the stars. I want you to understand, the stars could not deny that Jesus had been born. Something in the earth and in the galaxy exclaimed the birth of Jesus. It was something that those that studied the stars, just like these magi, these wise men, they would have known and understood some things because of the way that they studied and how smart they were as they studied the stars, that this particular star meant something. And it also meant that during that time, we see a surrender that they have to go and worship Jesus. And so as we enter in, that's what I want you to know. Many of your Bibles may say magi, some may say wise men, some may say wise scholars, but they are known as the magi from the east. That magi just signifies that they were scholars, that they did study the stars. They were astrologers, or what we would call astrologers in a sense. Extremely, extremely wise men. That's why we know them today as the wise men. They were learned priests of their nation as well. And so I want you to understand that this is a very elite group of men who are coming. They have seen something in the sky, says something to them, and it moves them so that they travel a great distance in order to meet this King of Kings. So it begins in chapter 2, the scholars from the east, or the magi from the east. It says, after Jesus was born in the Bethlehem village, Judea territory, this was during Herod's kingship. A band of scholars arrived in Jerusalem from the east, and they asked around, where can we find and pay homage to the newborn King of the Jews? We observed a star in the eastern sky that signaled his birth. We're on a pilgrimage to worship him. Now, I want you to understand this before we go any further, is that we see here that they have been studying the stars. They see up in the eastern sky a very specific star that signifies the King of the Jews has been born. And it's actually a star that signifies the King of Kings, the one in whom they themselves are priests. They themselves are being held to a very high standard and position in their society. And they want to come and pay homage. They want to come and worship him as well. And so we're seeing here that what they have seen now, it has taken them actually years to accomplish, because they are having to travel a great distance. And so because of that, probably by the time they do get to Jesus, he is probably a toddler, okay? So he has been born, and we know that on the night of his birth, what happens? There's an angel that is positioned in the sky, and I truly believe that that's what the Magi saw, is this angel in the sky signifying that the King of the Jews, the King of Kings, had been born, and that's what they see. The reason that I believe that is because all throughout the Bible, we see the Lord describing stars as angels, very specific kinds of angels as well. But also in Revelation, we see that Jesus now, who is seated at the right hand of the Father, when he visits John in Revelation, and he takes John up into the third heaven, we see that John describes him as the one with the 7 stars in his hands, or the 7 angels that are over the churches. But that's one of the reasons I truly believe that what they saw was an angel. And so we see they are starting to get into Bethlehem, into this village in the Judean territory, and they begin to ask around, where is this King of the Jews that has been born? It says, when word of their inquiry got to Herod, who is the king at that time, he was terrified, and not Herod alone, but most of Jerusalem as well. Can you imagine? They're like, what? A King of the Jews has been born? Because all of this has been done in secret. We know that Mary is being hidden and in secret. We know that Joseph has taken her and he hasn't said anything. He's married her. So I'm sure that for many people, if she's pregnant and having a baby, they're going to assume that that's Joseph's child, okay? So they don't know all of the other divine things that we now know about this particular nativity scene, right? So we are here now and we see that even Jerusalem is getting terrified. Even they are like, what is going on? We have not heard this. Herod lost no time. He gathered all the high priests and religious scholars in the city together and asked, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? So Herod, he also knows, okay, about the Jewish culture and the prophecies. And so he goes to the priest and he's like, hey, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? And they told him, Bethlehem, Judah territory. The prophet Micah wrote it plainly. It's you, Bethlehem, in Judah's land, no longer bringing up the rear. From you will come the leader who will shepherd, rule my people, my Israel. He's given the confirmation here of where Jesus will be born. And so we see this prophecy has been fulfilled. Now they're telling Herod, yes, it's in Bethlehem in Judah's land. This is so interesting that he would have been born. We know that Jesus is from the tribe of Judah. We talked about that yesterday. But now we see he was also born in the land of Judah in actual Bethlehem. So Herod then arranged a secret meeting with the scholars from the east, or the magi that are going to worship Jesus. This is pretending to be as devout as they were. He got them to tell him exactly when the birth announcement star appeared. So when he told them the prophecy about Bethlehem, he said, go and find this child, leave no stone unturned, and as soon as you find him, send word and I'll join you at once in your worship. So Herod is like, okay, go and find him. Go and hunt him down. Wherever he is, I want to go and I want to worship this King of the Jews. But we find out that is not Herod's posture at all. Instructed by the king, they set off. Then the star appeared again, the same star that they had seen in the eastern skies. And it led them on until it hovered over the place of the child. Wow. So this star, which I believe is an angel, is hovering. It's showing them, come and see, the Messiah is here. They could hardly contain themselves. They were in the right place. They had arrived at the right time. This is so interesting too, that there might have been a time, it says here in this version, that they didn't really see the star. But as soon as they start questioning, and it's as though the Lord knows, right, that they're supposed to do this, that it's a divine timing, a perfect timing of God, that they're supposed to go and pay homage or worship him. And we know that they're going to bring him gifts as well that will establish his kingship and everything else that has been prophesied as well about Jesus. But God then opens up a window of time, and then he allows them to continue to see the star in the sky, so much so that they stop at the place where the star is hovering over. Wow, right on time, God's perfect timing. They entered the house and saw the child in the arms of Mary, his mother. Overcome, they kneeled and worshipped him, and then they opened their luggage and presented gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So I want you to understand there were three things that these magi, these scholars, brought to Jesus. The first is gold. We know that gold represents kingship, okay? The next thing they brought was frankincense, and frankincense is a fragrance, but they probably brought it as kind of a resin. It is a very fragrant resin, and it symbolizes divinity, that he is God. So as you can see, they bring the gold, it establishes his kingship. Then they bring this frankincense, a very fragrant resin, and it actually then establishes Jesus as God. It is something that is given as a symbol of divinity, something that is divine, something that is God, okay? And then we see myrrh, which is also kind of like a resin type sap, okay, that is used medicinally at times. We know that myrrh is used when mixed with vinegar as a numbing agent whenever there is pain. And so we see here that myrrh actually represents humanity. It is a prediction, a foretelling of his future death, that he will take the cup of humanity when he is on the cross. So we see here in these three items that they brought, there is a lot of symbolism as they worship. They're overwhelmed and overcome as they come into Jesus's presence with these particular gifts as well that they have brought from their land to give to Jesus, that are then written in the gospel to signify that he is the King of Kings, that he is God incarnate, God in the flesh. He is the Son of God, that Jesus is God. And he also was the Son of Man, fully human, and that in his humanity, he would take on the sins of the world and die a human death. He would die a human death. And in that place be the sacrificial lamb for all of mankind. Wow. So let's go on. It says, in a dream, they were warned not to report back to Herod. So they worked out another route, left the territory without being seen, and returned to their own country. So there, in a dream, they were warned that Herod did not have an intention to come and worship Jesus. Okay? After the scholars were gone, God's angel showed up again in Joseph's dream and commanded, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt. Stay until further notice. Herod is on the hunt for this child and wants to kill him." So there's a warning from heaven that Joseph receives in a dream that they need to get up and go. They need to go to Egypt. They need to live there until God allows them to return back to their land. So Joseph obeyed, and he got up, took the child and his mother under cover of darkness, and they were out of town and well on their way by daylight. They lived in Egypt until Herod's death. Wow. This Egyptian exile fulfilled what Hosea had preached. I called my son out of Egypt. This is so beautiful. I want you to understand that in God's divine protection, there was also a fulfillment of the prophecy. That it says here that his son, I called my son, this is God's son, out of Egypt. And I want you to understand that when we look at Jesus and his redemption story, everything that he did, everywhere that he stepped, every place that was under his feet, it was a place of redemption. It was a taking back of territory that had been lost, territory that the enemy thought that he had gained. And one of those particular territories was Egypt. When we read earlier about the Babylonian exile of God's people, this is one way that God redeemed all of that back, was because Jesus then also had to kind of go into exile there in Egypt as well. And there in that place, he restored back what was always promised to God's people. Even though he's a baby, he's a toddler, he's a small child, right? And he doesn't come back until after Herod is dead. We see this as a redemptive story. And we see here that it has even been prophesied. I called my son out of Egypt. I called my son out of bondage, out of a place of bondage. Why would he do that? So that you can be set free, so that you can come out of your Egypt, so that you can come out of your place of bondage. That is why Jesus then would have to live in that place where a people would have been bound and enslaved and in exile. Jesus would have gone, because the very steps, even if they were toddler baby steps, his first steps in life, that already redeemed it all back. That breaks the yoke of bondage over your life, over all of the people who once were held captive there. This is so powerful. It says, Herod, when he realized that the scholars had tricked him, flew into a rage, and he commanded the murder of every little boy 2 years old and under, who lived in Bethlehem and its surrounding hills. Now, why did I say earlier that it took a journey for the Magi that probably was about 2 years? Because of this scripture, it confirms it. Because remember, it was Herod who said, tell me when you first saw the star in the sky. So they would have told him, oh, it was this day, which was probably 2 years before then. And then they take a journey that takes 2 years to get to Jesus. And then we see Herod flying into a rage and killing every young boy who is what? 2 years and under, okay? Who lived in Bethlehem and its surrounding hills, and he determined that age from the information he'd gotten from the scholars. I just said that. That's when Jeremiah's sermon was fulfilled. So this was also a prophecy and a sermon that Jeremiah gave that you can find in the book of Jeremiah. It says, a sound was heard in Ramah, weeping and much lament. Can you imagine? The crying as children are ripped from their mother's or father's arms and killed in front of them. 2 years old babies slaughtered. Rachel weeping for her children. Rachel refusing all solace, right? Rachel is weeping for her children. This is a nation that is weeping for her children, and nothing can bring them solace. Her children gone, dead and buried. Wow. Wow. I want you to know something really quickly here about Herod and this demonic influence that was over these people. Is that that's exactly what the enemy attacks. The most vulnerable and innocent and pure among us. He attacks and he tries to kill. If he can't do it in the womb, then he will do it when they're little. And so I want you to understand, this is not a new tactic that the enemy is using. This is one that he's been doing for a very long time. And we see here through the influence of Herod and this demonic witchcraft that was then unleashed over God's people, the most innocent, pure among them were killed. And the mothers and the families could not be comforted. Wow. This is later when Herod died. God's angel appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. Up, take the child and his mother and return to Israel. All those out to murder the child are dead. Joseph obeyed. He got up, took the child and his mother, and re-entered Israel. And when he heard, though, that Archelaus had succeeded his father Herod as king in Judah, he was afraid to go there. But then Joseph was directed in a dream to go to the hills of Galilee, and on arrival he settled in the village of Nazareth. This move was a fulfillment of the prophetic words, he shall be called a Nazarene. So I want you to understand all of the prophecies are lining up. From his lineage to where Jesus is born, to where the Magi find him, to where he goes into exile, so to speak, where he's having to hide from King Herod. And now coming back, we see that an angel then directs Joseph exactly where to live. He's supposed to live in the hills of Galilee. And I'm reminded of the wedding in Cana of Galilee, right? In this area where Joseph settles his family there and he becomes a Nazarene because they settle in Nazareth. This is why later on, especially in the Gospel of John, we find a lot of naysayers saying, can anything good come out of Nazareth? We see that our Messiah settles in right there with his earthly father and mother. And he is a Nazarene. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.